They take it in, absorb it, and then that becomes what they believe about themselves. And labels are shorthand versions of describing behaviors. Well, we ought to describe the behavior, not describe the person. And that's tricky sometimes. It takes a little bit more mental energy to say, in this case, she has a little bit of a challenge meeting new people, but once she gets to know them, she's just a wonderful friend. Yeah. And it recast it into a much more accurate perspective.
Welcome. We have Dr. Gray Otis here with us tonight, and we're going to be jumping into chapter 4, a chapter that is so vital and so important for everyone listening to really, really understand well. The title of this chapter is called Worthy of Love. Before we jump in, can you tell us how can we learn to strengthen our key core beliefs as we jump into this topic?
Well, we've talked before that all of us have these key core beliefs, and if they're negative, we want to replace them with more accurate and constructive core beliefs. But the title of this chapter and the focus of this chapter is really on the most central core belief that most people have, and yet it's the one that most people don't have a clue about, don't ever talk about it, it's never expressed. But it is this concept of whether we truly believe that we are worthy to be loved and to love, or whether we believe we're unworthy to be loved. And so this is one of the key factors on how we can better understand ourselves. If we get down to that central, most deep core belief, we can really make a difference in our life.
And you would say, if I'm understanding correctly, out of all of them out there, we've talked about that some people have hundreds, and we can have them consciously or subconsciously. You're saying that this is the fundamental core, with all of it boiling down. This is probably it.
Yeah. Right? And I'm not the only one. This is something that's been discussed for years now. Brene Brown, a noted sociologist, has referred to it. She didn't express it in exactly the same way, but it's this idea that a person really is struggling with all of these other things that they may or may not be aware of. But underneath it is this key fear of if I'm feeling like I'm stupid, well, who wants to love a stupid person? Right. So I believe that I really am unworthy to be loved. I may have other people that love me and care about me and want the best for me, but I'll kind of tend to dismiss all of that because that underlying fear of whether I'm worthy to be loved or not is still underneath the surface, playing against every one of the other, as you said, hundreds of other core beliefs.
Wow. So as we go into this, can we talk about shame, and how does the power of shame create some of these negative key core beliefs?
Yeah, and it's a very important aspect to talk about. You notice that most key core beliefs can be stated as I am statements. So I just mentioned one, I am stupid, okay? I once had that core belief, as a matter of fact.
Sad. You're anything but stupid.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't make any difference. If the belief is there, it trumps everything else.
True.
But notice the statement is a statement of being. I am stupid. Well, if I really was, or if somebody was, how do you escape from that? I'm 5'8" tall. I can't change that. It's not modifiable by me, okay? And so a lot of these core beliefs that we have are really tied to shame from two different perspectives. One, this is what I believe about who I am. And not only is that the core belief, but it's also that I am helpless to change this core belief. So it's got a double whammy. Yeah. And it can be very much and should be distinguished from the concept of guilt.
Wow. Okay, so tell us about guilt. How does this differentiate?
Well, guilt, I like to say, says that maybe I did something was wrong or inappropriate or not effective, or maybe I didn't do something that perhaps I should have. Okay. As opposed to shame that tells me there's something that is wrong with me. So guilt says I acted badly. Shame says, I am bad. And I've had people actually talk about how bad they really were. And of course, I didn't believe them, but they did. And it doesn't make any difference what I believe as a therapist. So we use guilt and distinguish between actions associated or things that we didn't do one way or the other as guilt because it helps us, I call them course corrections. If I acted badly towards somebody or did something that maybe would have been better done in another way and it's therefore was somewhat unhelpful for somebody, well, I learned from that. I feel guilty about it. Now I can say, oh, I need to change that behavior. I need
something about that. Yes.
Yeah, and I can do that because it's just something that I did, as opposed to shame, which says something
this is
who I am. Yeah. And so guilt is, oddly enough, pretty helpful for all of us. We make changes, we make corrections, we learn from our mistakes. We say, well, I don't want to do that again.
Right.
Yeah, it's all good. Whereas shame in those negative core beliefs that state who I am, that I'm locked in, I'm trapped. And that's what most people believe. It's not true, it's inaccurate, but if you believe it, it's your truth.
Ooh. And it sounds, so if I'm understanding this right, it sounds as if, an example would be, oh, that person made a bad choice versus that person is bad.
Yes, precisely.
And when I think of shame and guilt, I think a lot of times people tend to just group those in the same bucket. And to be able to see the difference of those, one can truly benefit you. It can help you change in positive ways, become a better person. Shame, it sounds like there's no good to that. Is that true?
No escape from it, no good from it. Yes. But the good news is, yes, we can escape.
Right.
If we understand that those are just negative core beliefs, and like any other negative core belief, it can be replaced with what is something that is something more accurate and constructive, a positive core belief.
Right. Okay. I'm going to go into some examples of this. So, an example of guilt would be, I did something wrong. And the shame part of that would be, there is something wrong with me. So here we have guilt again. I lied versus I am a liar. Guilt again is, I should have helped that person versus I did not care enough to help that person. I'm selfish. And the last one that you note here is, I acted badly versus I'm a bad person or I am bad. I mean, those, to really see the difference of those and see what we're telling ourselves is huge, saying this is the choice I made instead, this is the person that I am.
Yes, well said. This is not who I am. It's just a choice.
A choice.
As I said, sometimes I believed that I was stupid. No, I just made some pretty dumb choices, okay? And once I understood that and corrected it, then I never had to go back to it, and I never did.
Wow. And that ability to change, and that's powerful. And we need to realize that and remember that as humans, that we can change.
That is probably the single most important capability that we have, is to grow and develop, to learn. And really what we're talking about in key core beliefs is just learning that which is more truthful and then acting on it in a way that really is helpful for ourselves.
Right. Wow. So can we go into a little bit of how do shame-based negative core beliefs develop?
Well, it's an interesting perspective, and they come from all sorts of different places. A lot of times they come out of children's experiences, interacting with parents or siblings or others who they esteem as somebody that's important to them. Often it's done because children misinterpret or misunderstand things. But, for the example that we kind of talked about is a daughter does something wrong. And the parent says, honey, you shouldn't do that. That's going to be harmful if you hurt your brother, or those words to that effect. Or as opposed to the correcting parent trying to shame their child. Good children don't do that. Well, that's all they need to say, and immediately the child understands or misinterprets an understanding that if that's what good children do,
then
and
I am a bad person.
Yes, exactly right.
So important of the way we say things to children or to anyone,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
The words we say are so important.
Yeah.
Wow.
And, in today's world, I guess it's always been true, but we throw labels around at people.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not too bright.
Yeah.
Come to think about it, I had a girlfriend that said that to me.
Oh, that's so sad.
But my point is, if that's the label and I take it in, she was actually joking, but if I take that in as maybe I'm not too bright, then it's going to be a problem for me as I continue on through my life and kind of say, oh, I didn't handle that very well. Well, yeah, that just confirms that I'm not too bright. So sometimes these very, almost innocuous types of interactions with others can be a huge impact on a person, particularly if they misunderstand and then misinterpret what was actually intended to be said.
Right.
Yeah.
And instead of having a mindset of, oh, I could have done that better, versus, oh, I am a dumb person. I am an idiot. I am, all just being able to see those two differences can make a huge difference. And if we were able to teach this to others before they went through all of, life and high school and college and married life and everything. I mean, I wish there was ways we could really help people learn this at such a younger age. So as we've been talking about this, it seems that there is almost a predictable, once someone, goes down this path, it seems like there's a predictable pattern of how they escalate from one thought process to another. Can we go into that?
Yeah, by all means. And I think it's really important to go back and understand that if we use a label, we're probably labeling somebody else. But as I've seen, people that label others label themselves. And what are labels? They're all shame-based.
Wow.
I don't even like to hear the statement, oh, she's such a good baby. All babies are wonderful. They don't need to be good or bad.
Yes.
But again, it's almost, a silly label. But when somebody comes across and says, well, you're just nothing but a liar, that's a label. And if a person starts to believe that about himself or herself, then it can cause some real problems. And that's how a lot of these things develop.
Right. And even some labels that we don't think are necessarily bad or negative in any regard of, I hear lots of moms say, oh, she's just so shy. Yeah. And when you say that over and over and over and over again as a mom, that child will conclude, I'm shy. I am shy. I am shy.
They take it in, absorb it, and then that becomes what they believe about themselves.
Right.
And labels are shorthand versions of describing behaviors. Well, we ought to describe the behavior, not describe the person. And that's tricky sometimes. It takes a little bit more mental energy to say, in this case, she has a little bit of a challenge meeting new people, but once she gets to know them, she's just a wonderful friend. Yes. And it recast it into a much more accurate perspective.
Right. And that child will then probably think, I am a great friend. I can become a great friend, instead of focusing on just one side of it.
Exactly.
Wow.
And notice that's a positive core belief.
Yeah.
I am friendly, or I'm a great friend.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you can build those positive ones instead of the negative ones.
Yes.
Okay, let's dive into each one of these steps.
Yeah. And, we can kind of go, it almost kind of unfolds. And it's going to unfold a little differently for other people. But here's one set. I don't measure up because I always do dumb things. Okay. And it's interesting, if somebody believes that, they'll find the evidence that that is their truth. Mm-hmm. Well, then if I always do dumb things, then, I'm stupid. So no matter what I do, I cannot change this because I was born this way. I'm just not as smart as other people.
I've heard that so many times. This is the way I am.
Yeah.
This is just the way I am,
And you can see that is also based on comparison. We're comparing ourselves with somebody else. And always, I shouldn't say always, but virtually in terms of all negative core beliefs, that turns out as a negative comparison with other people. So obviously there's something inherently wrong with me. If I was born stupid, I must have the stupid gene. And that's just, something that I'm stuck with. And because of that, there's no hope that I can ever change it. I'm just basically stuck. in this concept of how I'm seeing myself. And so the really difficult part of this, it goes to the next step, which people don't really consciously think, but sometimes they do. Who wants to love a really stupid person? And so the last piece is, I'm unworthy to be loved.
Wow.
And that's the one that's not said very often, but that's what's underlying it all. And if we want to change course, well, first off, we have to understand that all of us have strengths and all of us have some shortcomings in our mental processing. And we all process, every single person processes their information differently.
Right.
It's just a difference. So nobody's inherently stupid. Nobody's inherently smart. Some of us have certain abilities, for example, in figuring things out spatially. Other people have things to figure out analytically. Other people are much more holistic in their processing.
True.
So all of these things are just differences. And it doesn't make anybody dumb or stupid. It just makes us a little different. If we can back out of that, then we can also say, well, yes, I am different, but I have some really wonderful qualities, and I am worthy to be loved.
Wow. Wow. And it makes me think of, this growth mindset is, definitely juxtaposing a growth mindset to these in this list where, you go from obviously something's wrong to me to there's no hope that it will ever get better. I mean, that's a very defining, trapping feeling.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are stuck right there. There's no hope that this will ever change or ever get better.
It's almost like a person builds the walls of their own prison. The good news is you can take those walls down, but you have to be aware that you have that capability to do it. And a lot of people don't because they're just trapped in that I am statement of who they are instead of describing their behaviors. Sometimes we all make mistakes. So what?
Yeah.
As long as we learn from them.
Yeah. Learn from them and keep going. Okay. I'd love to jump into the story that you have here. This woman has a really interesting experience that relates exactly to this.
Yeah, this is Portia's story, and very accomplished individual, doing well in her chosen career, married, couple of children, just what we would see as the epitome of a very successful individual who is moving through life very effectively and very successfully.
And it seemed like even in her community, she was, well known in her community. She was an avid runner. Like it seemed like she was in so many different regards. She was just nailing it. Yeah.
Nailing it is a good way to put it, I guess. Unfortunately, she was nailing herself because underneath all of this success that other people saw, she kind of saw herself as almost a fraud. And she didn't understand, but she always felt this kind of sense of discontentment. Also this sense that no matter what she did, she still needed to do more. More was expected of her. She, if she really wanted to be successful, well, here's another thing to do. Excel in this arena or that arena. And it just never was enough for her. She always had this underlying sense of unfulfillment and could not understand why.
Interesting.
Yeah. And when she worked with a mental health professional, that person asked her about her family history. And as she was talking about it, she talked about the older sister that she had. Now, she had wonderful parents, a wonderful sister, but her sister was a couple of years before her in school. And the sister was an outstanding performance person. She was academically very good. In sports, she was very good. And unfortunately, from time to time, different people would compare her with sister. Yeah. And it was never quite, she was really good. Academically and also in athletics, and in music. She was just a very high achiever. But she got the impression that no matter what she did, she could never be successfully compete with her sister. And she got this messages in subtle ways over a period of time. And that kind of stayed with her, even though much of the time she wasn't consciously aware of it. Now, by the way, these sisters loved each other. There was never any problem in that regard. Okay. Not the typical sibling rivalry.
Right. Okay.
But there was a little bit of a rivalry from Portia's perspective. And it all came down to the point that no matter what she did, from her vantage point, she said, I just can't measure up.
Oh, it's so sad.
Yeah. And unfortunately, despite all of the accomplishments and achievements and all of the accolades and all of people saying, oh, wow, Portia.
Right.
Yeah, it was never enough, because underneath it all was this kind of uncertainty that she just wasn't enough. And if a person's not enough, that can get translated into, I'm not worthy to be loved. If people really knew the real me, they wouldn't be so likely to like me, let alone love me.
Wow.
And so she carried that with her for years and years.
And it sounds like she was almost trying to earn love.
Excellent observation. Yes. And I think that's one of the problems that so many people face, that somehow we feel like we've got to earn our accomplishments. And if we get accomplished, then people will like us and they will love us.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is, love is not earned. And in fact, everybody is worthy to be loved. And so often, as I'm working with people that have a problem with this, I'll say, well, let's take 10 children. They come from 10 countries around the world. And which one of those is not worthy to be loved? And of course, it's a stupid question.
Right. But people don't realize that that's how they view themselves.
Yeah.
And I think right now, especially in our society, people are going to desperate measures to try to earn love.
It's exactly right.
And to make sure people hear that loud and clear, that you do not have to earn to be loved.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that goes right along with that, Aurora, is the idea that people have done things and now they no longer deserve to be loved. Well, yes, we've all done bad things and harmful things and hurtful things, but that does not deal with the underlying perspective that everybody is worthy to be loved. Now, some people are going to put themselves outside of the norm, and we understand that. But they're probably the ones that need to be loved more than anybody else. Be that as it may, in the case with Portia, she worked with her mental health professional. They uncovered all of this. And finally, Portia started to see, oh, I'm not in competition with myself. I'm not in competition with my sister. I'm not in competition with anybody. And I am worthy to be loved, and I am enough. Changed her life, and she went on to feel a lot more kind of that sense of contentment, peace, and satisfaction within herself.
That sounds like true self-confidence.
It really is. Yeah, I like that concept that true self-confidence does come from this sense of peace from within ourselves.
Within. It's not all the external factors, and it's not someone else telling you, it's you believing it.
We really emphasize that it doesn't make any difference what other people are saying. Yeah, it's nice to get a nice positive compliment every now and then.
Right.
But that doesn't determine who we are or our worth.
Wow. And I think it's really great that you're sharing these different experiences because, like hers, it's not that something horrible or traumatic or even a big T trauma or a small T trauma. She had no idea what was underlying. For her and for everybody else, everything external seemed to be going wonderfully well. Yes. And yet she still wasn't happy. And I think a lot of people are suffering in that regard. And they're telling themselves, but I have everything I want. I have, the family that I want around me. And I have a relationship that I like. And I have this and this and this. And yet I'm still just unhappy. And to really start diving into the why is what I think people really need to put that effort and energy into, because it's not external. It's
really true. And as the book points out, there's a number of stories of people have had really horrible experiences. Well, Portia didn't.
Right.
But it doesn't make any difference. It just matters on how we're really accurately and constructively seeing ourselves.
Okay, can you tell us the key skill of developing the belief, I am worthy to be loved?
Well, first thing is always to be aware.
Yes.
Okay. And most of the time, again, most people never say, oh, I'm unworthy to be loved.
Yeah.
You never hear somebody say that.
Okay. And just a quick question with you, in the career that you are in, if you would ask people that, what do people ever say? No, I do believe that, or I don't believe that.
Yeah, of course I believe I'm worthy to be loved.
Okay.
We all believe that, right?
So, but it's here and it's not here.
Yes, exactly right. And it is this concept of what we think and what we feel. We put them together and it's what we truly believe. And it's pretty deep-seated. But if you start to talk to them beyond the idea of, well, you have this concept of yourself related to a negative core belief. How does that play out? And a lot of times people will pretty quickly come to the conclusion, oh, yeah, why would somebody love me? And of course, the answer to that is, well, because you're worthy to be loved. But you first have to be aware of that. Then change it, and it's the same process, changing I'm unworthy to be loved, which is a negative core belief, to a desired core belief, I'm worthy to be loved. And then act on it, and then consistently practice it. Accumulate the evidence that, yes, you don't earn the worthiness to be loved, you just are. And then we tie it in with other positive core beliefs. And the person does develop that sense of assurance, that sense of peace, and as you said a few moments ago, that sense of self-confidence.
Wow. Okay, before we wrap up, I hope anyone that's listening can ask themselves these questions and really think for themselves how they're doing, because this is such an important topic. And I think it's so neat that you in your career are genuinely trying to help people believe that they are loved. So here is question number 1. Are you able to work through guilty feelings by changing how you think and act? And the next question is, by contrast, do you ever feel stuck with shame because you think something is inherently wrong with you that you cannot change? And I think those are really, really good to look through and think about, because like you said, it takes this consistent effort, but the rewards pay dividends of peace and fulfillment. And it doesn't matter how much effort it takes, it's worth it, because that key core belief will change everything in a person's life.
That is exactly right. And when we see people that are struggling with, for example, a diagnosable mental health condition, or just having a problem dealing with other individuals, or difficulties at work, for example, we just come back to the same central core perspective. And we do all sorts of other things, most importantly, of course, just strengthening the positive core beliefs. But if we don't get to this basic, fundamental, deep-seated, positive core belief, I am worthy to be loved, we're just skirting around the outside. And so a lot of times, for example, we worked with people with addictions, substance use, alcohol and drugs. If we never got to this point, yeah, they might recover. They might, never take a drink again or use drugs again. But they're still not where they want to be.
Right.
When this happens,
there's healing.
There's real healing. And I love that word healing because it means to become whole. And that's what we're talking about. Yes. This is the most, I think, central core to who we are as individuals and who we are in relationship to others.
That's beautiful. Oh, thank you so much. I really hope that anyone here listening can know that they are loved. No matter what they've gone through, no matter what they think about themselves, they don't have to earn it from anyone. Inherently, they're loved. So,
absolutely.
Thank you for being here tonight. I'm excited to jump into our next chapter.
Okay, thank you.